online, even though it says Yana, it's still Noach. So welcome everybody. But what a special Parsha. It's a special Parsha because it's a transformative Parsha. Of course, last week we said the same thing, and we'll say the same thing every week. Every week is transformative. But when you think about the first two portions of the Torah, there certainly is something which is even somewhat more incredible. What is more incredible? What's more incredible than other things is that, these first two parshas, they talk about a very big percentage of all of history, the first 2,000 years, and we kind of zip through these the first 2 millenniums almost of history till we get all the way to Abraham. And then, once we get to Abraham, we kind of we put on the brakes and we slow down and we kind of start vying in and zooming in. And even within these 2,000 years, we're very picky on what we're going to talk about. We don't talk about all that much with these years. All we're speaking about is we speak about very, very specific things. It's an important thing to remember when we learn the Torah. I was once listening to a talk, and somebody had quoted that they had listened to a talk from a non-Orthodox rabbi who had been criticizing the personalities from the Torah. He said, Abraham, when it comes to Akedat Yitzchak, the sacrifice of Yitzchak, what does he do? He doesn't talk to his son. You don't see any good, nice conversations. When does he start talking to his son? When he's taking him to slaughter him. And he was trying to say, from here we learn how not to behave. And that's just the most deplorable way of looking at the Torah. To believe that what the Torah is telling you is the full story, and these are, this is everything else is just left out. Of course, that's not true. So, of course, Avraham and Yitzchak had a great relationship before this, and everything else is just the important facts that we are zooming in. The Torah zooms in on the most important ideas, and we'll leave it up to books like the Medrash to tell us the rest of the story. So that's where that comes in really important when you'll think about Medrash and other types of books, Rashi commentators, the Talmud, that will give us the back end of the story. And going into our story today, I want to focus in on two levels of the story of the flood and Noach. The two parts of the story that I want to focus in is, number one, I wanted to zoom in a few details of what actually occurred and see what the Torah actually says and how the commentaries understand it, because anybody that will tell you that you can understand the Torah without commentary is talking absolute. I'm not going to say, you could fill in the rest of the words, because what's the proof is in the pudding. As soon as you start taking the Torah apart and don't rely on any commentaries, you'll come up with 50 different religions, or maybe 50,000 different religions, or maybe 50 million different religions. In other words, each and every individual will make up their own. So the belief that you could have a Torah without an interpretation is beyond ridiculous. And therefore the logical conclusion is there is a proper understanding of how things are supposed to be understood. It doesn't mean that there's not shivim panim, many ways of how we can understand. And welcome, Raina, nice to see you. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now, and let's dive into the portion. Now, the second aspect that I want to get into is to try to look at it from a more of a metaphysical perspective. What does it mean to us? So there's the historical perspective, what actually occurred. And then there's the meaning to us in our times. Why are we still over here reading the story these days today? How does it make a difference to you? Why should the story of Noach be something that we still commemorate? Now, I've mentioned this almost every time this portion, this idea comes up, that when you look at the story of the Ark, it's possibly one of the most out of the movies type stories. Even like Marvel could barely come up with such a crazy story. They still haven't managed to fit all the different species of animals and living beings into one little ark. We could barely fit them in a zoo, let alone an ark. So there's many questions that we could ask, and how does it fit, and what exactly are these measurements, etc. And we could have lots of questions. But when you're going to look at the story, when you have all these stories, when you listen to, if anybody has done what I used to do when I was younger, probably like a few days younger, I used to, when I say I used to, as when if it's a thing that I've enjoyed in the past, sometimes listening to debates on different topics, hearing how people talk about different topics. I used to enjoy listening to debates between theists and atheists. And one of the big claims that they often will pick on is the story of the flood. They like to pick on the story of the flood because, look, that's just a crazy belief. It's seriously, how did Noah go and get all the lions and all the bears and all these things into the ark? Well, first of all, there's lots of ways that we can explain it if we wanted to, because how does anybody build a zoo? That's
You
just
what the problem?
not only that, it took him 120 years to do it. Well, that leads to a lot of other questions. But here's the point. And this is the important point with every single question that you're going to see. Everything is miraculous. It wasn't a natural story. Okay, the only thing that was natural about this, and the only thing that was not miraculous, was the fact that it took him 120 years. In other words, God didn't help him with the actual building of the ark, but everything else God helped him with. Like bringing all the animals, like keeping all the animals tamed in an ark. That was just a miracle. So to ask how or why, it's just a question that we're not going to go down that way, because it's a miracle. You don't ask questions on how miracles happen. That's exactly the answer. There is no natural answer. This is not a natural scientific story, even though there are archaeologists that believe that they may have found the ark. There are lots of people that want to come up with scientific theories proving the story, and that's great, and they could be true, but that's missing the point. It's a miracle story, and that's the important point. This story is miraculous. It's one of the greatest miracles in history. And getting back to where I was starting from, that 120 years ago, 150 years ago, and I can't remember exactly where the research was done, but if you do a quick Google search, you'll come up with it. When civilizations did not know one of the other, that to travel from one civilization to another, you had to take a boat and travel for weeks and months. Every single civilization that was found, without having to talk to each other or any connection, had an old legend, thousands of years old, of some type of flood. Of course, each one had grown their own version of it. And what's incredible about that is that's exactly what the Torah tells us, that every single human being alive today would have lived through the flood, as in they are descendants of the people that came from the flood. And therefore, if there's anything, not every human being was by Mount Sinai. Not every human being was in Egypt, in the land of Israel. The only place that every single human being was by the flood. When I'm talking about in one time, that every human being on the face of earth, and the only thing that I could tell you is that if the world were to continue in some type of continuum, the one thing that the whole world will have a legend of is the coronavirus. Okay, that's just a separate talk. But this is something which is kind of a great phenomenon, that the whole world almost lived through this episode. There's very few episodes that the entire world descend from those people that experienced it. And those are the important introductions that I wanted to bring to you. But now let's dive into it and hope that we can actually get somewhere today. Where is this? Huh. I see that it has been changed. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, let's get into it. You're welcome to interrupt me with questions or anything like that at any time. But in general, I'm going to try to go through some of the points. I could tell you that every single line in the Torah has loads that we can discuss. But I want to get to certain focal points, and I'm not going to discuss every single line. That's the point that I wanted to say.
I just want to add, Rabbi, I did a quick search before, and the Australian Aboriginals also have a flood story that closely matches what's in the Torah.
100%. Wow, beautiful. I think you would struggle to find a civilization that did not have a flood story.
Yeah, they blamed the whole thing on a frog that drank too much or something, but it's a very similar story.
Yeah, well, what? As I say, everyone has a different version of it, but everyone has it. And we're the only ones that have the texts that we can go back in time, and that's how you would, if you would want to corroborate who has the best version of it or the most corroborated, I would say ours. I don't think many other civilizations actually kept texts of their traditions as much as we did. Okay, let's look at go through some of the concepts, important ideas. Okay, it starts with Eile Toldat Noach. These are the generations of Noach. Noach it says the word Noach twice. Kabbalah loves to talk about this, and it tells us that the word Noach in Kabbalistic text, we're told that the flood of Noach is the flood is called Mei Noach, the waters of Noach, which is going to get us into, at the end, when we're going to get back to it, the metaphysical meaning in our times. What does it mean that it's Mei Noach, the waters of Noach? Why is it the waters of Noach? Noach, what does Noach mean? Noach means?
Comfortable.
Comfortable. It could also mean to rest or tranquil. Yes?
Yep.
And if you have waters that cause a flood and flood the world, would you call those tranquil waters that burst out of the ground and burn up the world or whatever, destroy the world? It doesn't sound like very tranquil waters to me. So they tell us, why does it say Noach, Noach? Why does it say Noach twice? To teach us that there's two types of waters. There's two waters of Noach. There's the higher waters and the lower waters. Now, I want to just point that out because we're going to talk about this as we go on towards the end, hopefully. Now, the next big thing that all the commentaries talk about is this line. Noach was righteous, Ish Tzaddik. He was Ish Tzaddik. How many people do you know in the Torah that are called an Ish Tzaddik, a righteous man? How many people do you know that were called righteous? Almost does not exist. Okay, the only person that's called a righteous person in the Torah is actually Noach. Okay, now the question is, was Noach the most righteous of people? And there's several explanations given, but Noach was not the most righteous of person. He was, according to all opinions, he was a righteous person. Some opinions say that he was righteous even compared to Abraham, and some people said no, he was righteous. What was he? In his generation, only for his generation. Now, the Maggid of Mezrich, who was the second leader of the Hasidic movement, he says that Noach was actually really an incredible tzaddik. He was so righteous, but why do we say, yes, we look at him down as though he was only for his generation? He never managed to persuade the people of his generation to transform their lives. And he says, well, that's because the people were so extremely wicked. And therefore, you can't, he says it's not a real fair comparison to compare him to Abraham. Why is it not a fair comparison to compare him to Abraham? Because Abraham lived post-flood. The post-flood era, we're going to see, are better people, even though they create the town of Babel, and we have people that are serving idols and whatever it is. People are not great. But as bad as people were post-flood, before flood, they were much worse. And therefore, it's not really fair to compare Noach to these people. Okay? Now, Noach we're going to, of course, Noah has his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Shem is the most important. Why is Shem the most important? Because he has the influence. That's where Abraham comes from. Shem ends up setting up a school of teaching, a yeshiva, of which he, of course, Shem.
Rabbi, I think you may have dropped out.
Yeah.
Yes, no sound.
No sound? Ah. Well, it's not raining. We can't blame a flood.
Looks like internet problem. Hi, Raina. How are you?
I'm good, Noah. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Excellent. Good to see you. Hi, Mushka. Hi, Clive. Or probably Shelley as well. Yeah, good one.
Hi. We're eating dinner. We're eating dinner at the computer. That's why we're not on screen.
No worries.
Oh, I'm back on.
Sure.
Hello, could you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. I was just talking and like 20 minutes later, I think, did any of you have you guys heard any of it? Did I like a few minutes, I was just talking and my wife's like, you're talking to nobody. Okay, well, that's embarrassing. Okay, that's not embarrassing because I didn't even know. I'm just kidding. All right, let's try this again. Maybe take two. Let's get into it again. Okay, I'm just going to repeat everything I've said. You just pretend that you haven't heard it. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that to you.
You dropped out after you said that Shem set up a school of learning something.
Okay, let's go on. We don't have that much time to think now. This is what is the reason for this? Why is this flood going to happen? He says, now the earth was corrupt before God and the earth became full of robbery. Now it's very interesting, this thing that he says, what was corrupt? It doesn't say the people, but the earth. Why does it say the earth? I'll tell you what my understanding of this thing. Why does it say the earth? And you end up seeing that actually what gets the punishment is not just the people, it's also the earth. The earth is what has the world is where the people are. The world has to be a place that is receptive of people changing and transforming their lives. And as long as the world is not receptive to that, people won't do it. And what has to happen is the whole world is going to have to be destroyed. It's not just the people, but the earth. The earth has to be a place that is more godly, more welcome to godliness. What you see very interesting, and you see this earlier, there was a man by the name, I think it was Chanoich. You see that everybody lives for hundreds of years. Actually, we're going to be told that the person that's lived longest in history, recorded in history, is Methuselah. Okay, Methuselah is the great-grandfather of Noah. And funnily enough, he passes away on the age of 969. When does he pass away? The day that Noah enters the Teva. But as a reward, God does not start the flood for 7 days afterwards. Noah enters the Teva, and 7 days later, after Noah has finished the mourning period of Methuselah, Methuselah was a tremendous saint. He was also a very righteous man. The world suddenly, the flood starts, and he doesn't want Methuselah's life to be shortened, and that's what he waits for. Now, there's another person that was also a very, like, most of these people were not necessarily that holy. Methuselah was one of the great people. I think the other one was Chanoch, but I think if I remember correctly, Chanoch died at a very young age of like 350 something, terribly, terribly young age. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that's crazy. Of course, that's not a young age. But when the average lifespan is 900 plus, 350 is relatively short. And we're told that the reason why he died is because he'd been a righteous person that entire life. And he started making signs of going in the other direction. And that's why, Kim was the end of last week's portion, God now decides to take his life away. Why does God take his life away? Just because he starts to do something wrong. So the answer is, if you live 300 years, 350 years, and you've done a good job, God doesn't want you to ruin it. So what do you mean? Let him change. The answer was that at those times, when people, they went in a trajectory, they didn't change. They didn't do teshuvah. Teshuvah was not something that was really capable of them doing. What's the proof? The proof is that Noah was 920 years building this ark in order in front of the people, that the people should see him building it, and none of them changed their ways. Because the people were not capable of repent. And not only that, Noah did not believe that the people were capable of repenting, of changing. And what we're going to see is the big change that occurs through the ark is God makes the possibility of tshuva much easier, the ability to repent much easier. That's the big change that has to happen. Am I still there? Are people still hearing me? Yeah? Okay, good. Okay, now, let's look at some of the other ideas that we have. What does he say? Of course, we got the size of the ark. The size of the ark is going to be 300 cubits of length. Now, 300 cubits is approximately 144 meters long. 144 meters long is about the length of, I don't know, maybe a soccer field or something like that. But the width is not quite that long. It's 50 cubits, which is around 24, 25 cubits. And 30 cubits high is about 14 and a half meters. Sorry, 50 cubits is 24 and a half meters. And 30 cubits high was about, it's around 14 and a half cubits, but it's about 48 centimeters per cubit. So it's just less than half a meter. So, so you see that it's around the average height of a house, of a triple-story house that we live in. You know, if each floor is about 4.6 meters, it was a 3-story building. That's how high it was. It was a relatively long boat, not that wide. And that's, now Kabbalah talks about the reason for each of these things. Why was it 300 cubits? What was the reason for that length? I would love to get into it. We just don't have time to get into all of this. But I want you to be aware that every single step over here has a reason for it. Then nothing is random. It's not like, well, that's the measurement that God said that will fit the ark, or that will fit the animals. There's no such thing as randomness in the Torah. There's a specific reason. Just because we don't have time to get it, or I don't know the reason, it doesn't mean that it's not there. It happens to be the reason 300 meters could be, I do know, but we'll talk about that another time. Now, what does he say? I am bringing the flood upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which there is a spirit of life from breath of the heavens. All that is upon the earth will perish. Now, on the earth, we actually learn that the fish don't have to die. Many fish survive. There's only and not only that, some plants are able to survive through this, according to some opinions, some really strong plants. But most plants, as you can imagine, are destroyed. Okay, so now what you say over here, I will set my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you and your sons, and your wife and your sons' wives. Now, what's interesting is what would be the correct order for this to be said? It should have said, you shall come into the ark, you and your wife, and then it should have, and your sons and your sons' wives. Why does it separate? First you and your sons, then your wife, then your sons' wives? That doesn't seem like the logical order. The reason for this is because he was telling them that I want you to have separate quarters, male quarters and female quarters, because I don't want you to involved in procreation. A lesson that when the world is being destroyed, we're not allowed to procreate. Another time that happens is at the time of the famine in Egypt, when Yosef has children. The Torah tells us that before the famine came is when Yosef had the children, because when there's a time of famine and people are dying, it's not the time to have children. Okay, I don't think that rule applies to the time of coronavirus if you're trying to make any connections. Okay.
I was actually thinking, Rabbi, about all the animals they brought on board. Did that limitation apply to the animals?
Yes, it did. That law applied to the animals as well. The animals were not allowed to cohabit. They weren't allowed to have children. They weren't allowed to mate. We're told that all the miraculously all the animals obeyed exactly what they had to do, except for, I believe it was the raven and maybe the fowl that tried to cohabit. Everybody else followed the spiritual miraculous guideline that they were getting from God, just like they managed to make their way. Everybody else behaved themselves. Okay, now what do they bring into this ark? All living things of all flesh. Now that means that there was, whether they will be you'll see that whether it's fowl, birds, all animals, creeping, so insects, all different types, each will come to you to preserve alive. Now it doesn't say shall come. How do we know? How did they get there? He didn't have to travel around the world finding animals. It says shall come to you. They came to him. Okay, Yovo elecha. They miraculously came, two of each. Two of each rocked up on that day and said, Allah, let me on the ark. And they all came just like that, just like it is in the movies. I haven't really seen the movies. I'm just assuming. Okay. Now, so then we see that he said you should take for yourself of every food that is eaten. So also preserve the food, because much of the food, vegetation, the seeds, you have to gather food, I think, to replant some of those foods as well. And also for them to eat, he has to stock this, that people could survive. You're going to see that the people lived on the ark for 365 days in total, the days of a solar calendar. Okay. Let's go now on to the second reading and go a little bit further into the story before we get into the if anybody wants to interrupt with any questions on the basic meaning of the story, you're welcome to. Okay. Now, what happens over here is now.
Sorry, Rabbi, can I just ask, with the animals that came on board, we only. Sorry, I think you're about to address it. Actually, the clean animals. Yes, sorry.
Okay. Did you want to ask and then?
Oh, I'm still getting my head around the rule that the animals can't reproduce, and it's going to be tough if there were rabbits.
I'll tell you that it was a miracle. All right.
I would definitely accept that as a miracle.
Yeah. It was all, every element of it was just a miracle. Okay. There's no, you could maybe find some type of explanation. It was dark, or they separated them. That's also possible. That they actually literally separate them in separate cages for each type of species, or find a way to distance them. It was all miraculous. That's the most basic understanding. In other words, it's not an excuse. That's what we're told. That it was a miracle, that they all behaved themselves. They never ate each other. They never fought. They just ate what was given to them. Okay, so now he says, come into the table. Now this is another one of those like words that the commentaries love to talk about, especially the Hasidic ones. These words, boy ela teva, come to the teva. Now we're told that what is a teva? You come into the ark. The teva could also mean, the word teva over here could also mean a word. What's the word? Come into the, you have to come into, you have to come into the, you have to come into the word of the Torah. Now we're all going through, what it's telling us is this: we're all going to have times that we suffer in some way. We're going through our own struggle. What do? What's the answer? When the world is flooding around you, when you're lost and confused and you need guidance, how are you going to get over here? So it tells us the word, the world seemed all around you to be distorted and messed up, and you're lacking in inspiration and guidance. Where are you going to get that from? And the answer is, come into the Teva, into the Ark. Now, what's the Ark? Again, the Teva is come study some Torah. That you'll always be able to return to the Torah and find some way to connect. Okay. So now we're told that when it comes to the kosher animals, which we call Behema HaTahora, you're supposed to take how many? 7 pairs. A male and its mate, and on the unclean it's just 2. Sorry, it's just 2. Okay, so we're seeing much more. Why do we want to do this? In order to keep their seed alive. God wants it to be the seed that comes alive. Now, what do we see? That Noah does just as God has told him. He doesn't do more than what God has told him. This is one of the critics that we have against Noah, is that he's a great person, but he doesn't go beyond the letter of the law. He just sticks to what God tells him to do. And he does exactly what God tells him. He doesn't do much more than that, which is one of the issues that we, so to speak, take upon him, take from him. Why aren't you trying to do more than what God says? Why don't you try to bring other people into the phase? So he says, Noah, he believed that the people were damned, that they had no chance of correcting themselves. He didn't believe in the people. And one of the lessons is that a real leader has to believe in the people's chance to change and to improve. As soon as you stop believing in your people and you don't really give them a benefit of the doubt, then you don't have a position of leadership. And this is one of the issues that Noah, he was a good man, but he was burnt out by the people. He saw how wicked they were, and he didn't think that there was an opportunity for repentance. And when you contrast him with Abraham, Abraham did believe in the people. Abraham believed that people, now even though they were idolaters and some of them may have been murderers, at the end of the day, he believed that they can change. Now, a lot of the reason for that, as I mentioned earlier, is because it was post-flood era, and post-flood people were more, they weren't as stuck in their ways. They had seen the destruction, and God had actually transformed the whole way of how the world works. And I'm keep on telling you this concept because I want you to understand what the significance is, not just in the details of the story, but what this story has when we talk about the whole of the framework of creation. Last week we speak about creation, and this week we're going to be talking about this flood. How does this story of the flood, what's so significant in the flood that the Torah had to tell us about it, number one? And number two is what was it, what stage was it in the birth of the world that it comes before the Jewish people? Really, the Torah should only be talking about the Jewish people. Okay, and that's the groundwork that I'm trying to lay down as we go through the story. Okay. Now, how old was Noah when he enters the Torah? He was the young age of 600 years old. I know that sounds crazy once again. That was normal in those days. Noah lives till over 900 years old. And all the people that were born prior to the flood live old. But you'll see, as soon as it comes after the flood, the first few generations live a few hundred years, but no one's living 900 years. And the numbers, the lifespan dwindles quickly, right? By the time that Avram is around, some few hundred years later, he's down to a mere 175 years, poor guy. You know, that's the type of life that was, but you see, it's a massive contrast. And one of the things that God wanted is that you should have this contrast. One of the things that's going to allow for the major change is the actual concept of a shorter life. It's been planned there by God for a very particular reason. But I wanted to highlight this little 600-year concept because it's a little thing that I love, and I think you might enjoy it too. The Zohar, which according to our tradition, was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai some 2,000 years ago. And in the Zohar, he writes that at the beginning of the 6th century, in the 6th century of the 6th millennium, what's going to happen is you're going to have the reopening of the ground. Now, I want to show you this. This is the words. Look over here. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month. Now, the second month, according to most opinions, is talking about the month of Cheshvan, the month that we're in now. Okay, not the month in the later part of the Torah. The months start from Nisan. So, what does he say? In the second month, the 17th day of the month, which is basically would be approximately 2 weeks from today. That's interesting. I want to just look something up. Give me 1 second. I just thought of something a little bit funny. Give me 1 second. All right. Okay. Well, if you want to know what I was looking at, I just wanted to look at what was the date of the American election. Why am I looking at it? Because I think that it's a significant date. I don't know why. It's just one of my own little bomber-mises. I think that something, it's a significant date. In November, it happens to be the date before. The day of the election is November 3rd. The day after the election is the 16th. My wife is going to give me a mapala about this after the shir. So I'm just preparing myself. But I just made this connection that the Mabul started on the 17th of Cheshvan, okay? And that would be November 4th this year. That would be the day after the election. And who says, now, what's going to happen? I just have a feeling that something strange is going to happen in the world over there. I don't know what it is. It just I get that feeling. Anyway, now you get to get a little bit of a taste of some of my weird ideas. Some things that I shouldn't be sharing online. All right. So it's only with my closest friends that I could share these little weird theories. For those that are interested, could stay later on to find out why I think all these weird things. Okay. But here it is. On the 17th day of Cheshvan, which in our calendar would be exactly 2 weeks from today, would have been the day that the Mabul started. Now, if you want to know what year it was the year 1656. Now, let's do a quick math calculation. I didn't even do this. So this is the year of 5781 minus 1656. Somebody quickly do the calculation. Tell me the answer. How many years ago was it? 5781 minus 1656. Who's got the answer? All right, I'll have to check it up afterwards. I was trying to figure. Come on, Noah. What? How long?
I wasn't even trying.
Oh, come on, give it. To put in the calculator. 5781. You can interrupt me later. 5781 minus 1656. I believe it was 1656, the year that the Mabul happened from creation. How many years ago was that?
Still looking for my calculator.
That's why I didn't do it. I think I'll find the calculator on the computer quicker.
Yes.
My calculator I found. All right. I'm playing games in the middle of a share. This is not good. I've got so much to say.
Yeah, it's good. Do it.
Sorry. Whoops. I'm doing this wrong. I apologize for wasting everybody's time, but I'm just getting a bunch of really weird ideas in the middle of the share. I suddenly realized that I want to figure out how long ago the Mabul was. 1656 equals 4125, 4,125. I have no idea what the significance of that is, but that's just to let you know how long ago the Mabul happened. 4,125 years ago. There you go. Now, oh, okay. So, now what is the cool thing that I wanted to tell you about this is that the Zohar tells us that this 600 years of Noah's life is a very important, has a significance for something else, because it tells us that what happened, the great deep was split and the windows of the heavens opened up. Okay, it sounds much better in the Hebrew. Nivku kol mayanis sohoim, rabba varubas hashamayim niftachu. And the Zohar gives an incredible prophecy, and it tells us that in the 600th century of the 600 years, two very significant things are going to occur. What are those two very significant things that are going to occur? He says that the great deep, all the springs of the great deep were split. That refers to science. Science will start to have an crazy burst. Okay? Now, even if you don't believe that the Zohar is 2,000 years old, according to every opinion, it's at least 900 years old, and that's way before the scientific revolution happened. Okay? And that started in the 1700s. Is that 1700s is when it started. Okay, and the second thing that it tells us is that the windows of heaven are opened up. Tells us the Zohar that tells us that the secrets of the Torah will start to be revealed. And as a Hasidic, the Hasidic masters understood that that was going to be the Hasidus, which is the secrets of the Torah. Okay, so just a little thing that can say that I'm biased, but that's one of the prophecies. That is what is written in the Zohar. Okay. Now, here we go into where I want to get really deep into some of the ideas, the significance of this whole episode. Verse 12. The rain was upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. This is a very interesting idea. The rain, the heavy, harsh, crazy rain lasts for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, this concept of rain and what is it doing? And this leads us into a whole new understanding, a whole question about what was actually occurring, what was actually happening over here. Okay. Now, I mentioned to you at the beginning that the Midrash and Kabbalah refer to the flood as Mei Noach, the waters of Noach. The waters of Noach means that the waters of tranquility, the waters of rest. And I don't think anybody over here thinks that there was any rest that was occurring in those days. Noah certainly wasn't resting, and everybody else was being wiped out. So what was occurring? The Kabbalah tells us, Zohar mentions this concept as well, but Hasidus really elaborates on this. That what had happened over here? God had just created the world some 1656 years earlier. The world was not that old. It was just over 1,500 years, 1,600 years old. And what had happened is that he'd created a world, and he just needed the world to, so to speak, establish itself. But he needed one thing most important. There was one really important ingredient that the world was fighting against more than anything. What was that? The ability for people to change. The concept of reconnecting and changing your path. This is one of the things that is fundamental to Judaism that some of the secular world will struggle with. And that is that if you want to see the way people on the left or in secular world sometimes will judge a person, they'll go look at their record. And they'll look at their record, and they'll be looking in the record all the way back to the way they acted. You know, the person could be 60 years old, and they'll try to find what they did when they were, this as a young teenager or a young adult, and they'll say, look what's on that person's record. This person is a bad person because look what they did. Or why do I bring this up? And I'm sure you could probably think of certain cases where this has happened. Once a person is damned as a criminal, that's it, he's a criminal, he's lost. And this is a fundamentally anti-Torah idea, that a person that has messed up is lost or messed up and cannot rectify their way, cannot change. This is the pre-flood existence. Pre-flood existence, that would have been true. People struggled to change their ways. Why? Because why should you change when you're living 900 years? Nobody's changed. There's no big threat. You're immortal almost. You're going to just live for however long you can. There was nothing pushing people to improve their lives. And therefore, people got really stuck. This plentiful that they had made them stuck in their ways. And Hashem saw this whole existence of how the world, the status of the world, as being evil. Evil is in people just weren't becoming better people. They weren't improving themselves. They weren't growing. They would fall and they would fall and fall and fall, and they would just fall further and further, and they just wouldn't get back. This was a problem. Life is not supposed to be that long. Life is now short, and God, we should all live long and happy lives. But one of the benefits of that is that we don't have time to waste. We don't have time. People in those days were getting married at the age of 100 years old. That's when you started having kids. You were not culpable for punishment until the age of 100. And that wasn't a different 100 years. It was the same 100 years of our days, 365 days of the solar calendar, or 354 of the days of the lunar calendar. That hadn't changed. That meant that people were literally stuck in this long life that just wasn't conducive to make change, to improve, to work hard. And that was to their own detriment. And therefore, what needs to occur, the world needs to go through a process of rectification. And the way you rectify something was when something reaches a certain level of impurity, you have to go through a purification process. The way you go through a purification process is, in today's day and age, or not in today's day, according to the Torah, how does a person become impure? Now, impure is not the same thing as sin or dirty. How does a person become impure? The way a person traditionally would become impure is if they came in contact with the opposite of life, of death. They come in contact with, whether it's a dead body or a part of something that's dead, etc. And the other way that a person today, the only way that a person today's day and age can actually properly become impure biblically is a woman that has their menstrual period or after birth. And what is that? Because they've actually lost the potential for life. Now, what do they have to do in order to get over that impurity? They need to do something which is called immersion in a mikveh. Why? What is immersion of a mikveh? It has to be the number of the minimum amount of water that a mikveh can contain is 40 se'ah. 40 se'ah, that's the amount that covers the body. Why 40? Because 40 is the same day, the same amount of time that, according to the Torah, and I don't know what this is scientifically, but according to the Torah, in order for a fetus to be considered a life or something of permanence or something of that actually existed, it needs to have been there for 40 days. Now, I don't know what this means with regards to abortion. If Judaism, if we consider abortion from conception or from 40 days, but definitely Judaism considers it a fetus, a living being, from 40 days, because from 40 days it's decipherable as a as some type of living being. So 40 days gives us the time. We're told that within 40 days, you cannot decide, there's no way of knowing the gender or anything else. Things can change within the first 40 days. After the first 40 days, there's some level of apparent recognition of a life force within that, within the womb. Okay, that's when it becomes not viable, but almost like a viable. It becomes like a true entity. If a person has what I'm thinking this means halachically is if a person has a miscarriage within the first 40 days, I don't think it's considered really a miscarriage halachically. Okay, it's just to clarify that. We're also told something interesting, that if a person wants to pray for the gender of the child, they could only do so in the first 40 days, because after the first 40 days, that ain't changing. That's just the way it is. Now, once again, I'm not saying any of this is scientific. This is what the Torah says. So what does it tell us? 40 days represents birth, rebirth. If you've gone over death, the way you want to do it, you have to get through the concept of rebirth. You have to reconnect, rebirth, reconnect to something. And because everything with 40 days and birth is what is lacking when you have death, that's why the woman has to immerse themselves in a mikveh, or a man that has come in contact with the impure body has to go into a mikveh, which is a minimum of 40. And what does that do? Now, here's where it gets interesting. I'm sorry that I'm getting a little bit esoteric over here, but if you hold on for a moment, this may be interesting. The word to immerse yourself in a mikveh is in Hebrew is litbol, okay? And the letter for that is toval, is tet bet lamed, tet vet lamed. You take those same letters and you twist them around, you mix them around, they spell the word batel. Now, have you ever wondered why it is that if a person is impure, they go to a mikveh, they immerse themselves in this living body of water, this wellspring of water, and it has to be, of course, with particular guidelines. It's not just a bath, it's not just a swimming pool, there's particular guidelines. But what do? They immerse their body fully and completely. They have to make sure there's nothing in between the body, the water, and then what happens? Once they immerse themselves, they're pure. What happens? Why is that? And the answer is because they become batel. They go back to a pre-creation status. What happened in creation? On day 2 of creation, the world was fully covered by water. And then what happens? On day 3, God creates dry land. But when he creates dry land, now we're not fully covered by water. And when we're not fully immersed in the water, that allows room for us to believe that we're our own identity. In other words, it's like a fish that's inside the water. When the fish is inside the water, they recognize, so to speak, that their life is dependent on the water. Right? A fish knows that it cannot leave the water. So they recognize that they're engulfed in the water. The water is what's keeping them alive. We, in dry land, we think that we can live independent of God. We don't require God to live. Right? And therefore, when we immerse ourselves in the water, we go back to the second day of creation when it wasn't possible to live without a miracle. There was no dry land. We get fully immersed, and what had happened, we become batel, nullified. Nullified means we recognize that we have no independent existence outside of God. We go back to the source. What source? The source of life. When we're able to immerse ourselves in that 40 day, what is it? What is that number of 40 sa'ah? 40 sa'ah is supposed to be, there's actually a measurement for it. It's supposed to be 3 cubits high and 4 cubits, and 1 cubit wide, 1 cubit squared wide. That's supposed to be the official size of a human being. If you can find a box that's the size of a human being, in other words, what we're saying is the water has to fully cover over yourself. The only way that we as people can overcome our own flaws is if we transcend ourselves and reconnect to Hashem. We immerse in the mikveh. We connect to our inner, deeper source of life, the original connection of life. And through that, we're reconnecting to Hashem. And that's why when a person goes through any type of mikveh, for example, a convert, what does a convert, or the Jewish people, in order to become the Jewish people, they had to go through mikveh. Why does a convert have to go through to mikveh? Because they need to go through this rebirth. They have to almost be like reborn. The way we enact that rebirth is through going to a mikveh. Okay? That's why mikveh is so important. That's why mikveh is considered the most important thing to have in a community, the mikveh. The ladies' mikveh, that family purity, because it's that whole connection between the family and Hashem. Okay, and where do we see that? We see that within the 40 days. What has happened to the world within these 40 days is the world gets totally immersed. We read, I'm not going to go through all of it. We don't have time to go through all of it. But what you see is that for 40 days, their entire earth is totally covered over by the water. If you look over here, the waters became powerful and increased very much upon the earth. And we're told that they were so high that they were above the highest mountains. They were 15 cubits, which is about 7.5 meters above the highest mountain, to tell us the entire world was covered by this water. Why? Because it wasn't just the people had to perish, it was that the earth needed to be reborn. And with that rebirth, what was going to happen is that human beings that were going to be born afterwards were going to be different. The world was now going to be a place that wasn't the same world that was created on day 3. It was now a place that was amicable for change. It was a place that pushed people to change. The atmosphere in the world was going to be totally different. And that also relates to one you're going to see later on, when the water, they finally come out of the earth, the ark, you will see that Noah is told that what he has to do is he has to, I'm just looking for it over here. They leave the ark, and he's told that, look, every moving thing that lives shall be yours to eat, like green vegetation I've given you. And even every moving thing, we're allowed to eat animals. Prior to the time of the flood, humans were not allowed to eat animals, okay? Because if they would have eaten animals, they would have felt totally immortal and as though they're superior to everything else. But now, because of their weaker makeup, this is what we're told by the commentaries, they're allowed to start eating animals. But at the same time that they're allowed to eat animals, of course certain animals, but flesh with the soul, you're not allowed to eat the blood of an animal, and you're not, but your blood and your souls, but don't think that that gives you a right to take human souls. So there's now a big difference between the blood of certain animals and the blood. What does Hashem remind us? That it's only certain, it's not the blood of human beings, okay? And that's very important, because this tremendous transformation that occurs to the world during the time of the flood is such that it allows people to reach a level where they won't be dominating over each other by eating an animal. They have now a job to elevate and to work with animals, and by even using an animal to eat them, they're elevating it. Now there's a new mission. But the same thing it tells us, you're not allowed to kill, you're not allowed to eat an animal. One of the laws, that the major Noahide laws, is that we're not allowed to eat the limb of a living animal and things like that. Okay, so I want to try to bring everything together quickly. I've been rambling on today, very different type of shir to what I normally give. I try to give you the mix between a few details that I wanted to highlight. And we touched on a few parts of the actual story of Noah. And I try to try a different type of shir. But what I was trying to bring in is that when we look at the story of Noah and the Ark, we can look at it as just some interesting story that is just a very important historical event, but it doesn't have much significance for our times. And the truth is that this story is so important for our times, probably never been more important. Well, I don't have time because we've gone over time now to get into that detail. But when you look at the concept of where the world is right now with this particular virus and things going into lockdown and something, you see something significant, whatever your belief is about what is going on, you cannot deny that there's something significant going on. Even if you were to believe that was all just a hoax, as some people have said, the very fact that such an event can occur tells us that something significant is happening. And what that tells us is that there's stages that the world goes through, and it's our job to boil our teva, to come into the teva in these historical important moments in history and try to find what is the message that God is relating to us. Now, I can't tell you that I have the answer to the question, but the story of Noah could never be more important than today's day and age, in my opinion. It couldn't be more relevant. And it's our job to find a way to connect to it. And the way I want you to connect to it, based on what we discussed today, is the two thoughts that I wanted to leave you with. Is the number one, that you should enter into the Ark and find something that you could connect, whether it's these shiurim on Tuesday nights or things that you can connect and live with to get inspiration. It doesn't have to be this, but something that you get, and that's your teva, that's your Ark, that's your place of salvation, so to speak, of relaxation. And number two is you find a place for rebirth. Now, what I mean is that you have to always remember that whatever situation you're in, when you reach that point that you feel that you cannot go further, that's crucial to stop and say, hold on, I have to have a rebirth. I have to reignite this thing. The way we do it is by immersing ourselves in the belief of Hashem controls the world. That's what a mikveh is. A mikveh is that you're fully consumed within God's world. You're fully consumed within that water is you're fully consumed and totally dependent on God for your existence. When you do that, that's how you mentally achieve the rebirth. The rebirth is that moment when you recognize that there's something that's transcendent, that transcends way beyond your own existence. And we have to get out of our own existence in order to achieve this greatness. That's the only way we can do it. That's this flood. This flood, you enter into the Ark of Torah, but ultimately you recognize that you are subsumed within God's existence. That's your rebirth, and that's how you make sure that nothing is ever able to consume you. Okay? That's the reasons, that's the lessons that I learn out. There's thousands of lessons, as I say, from this portion, but those were, I thought, the extremely significant lessons that you can take out from the Torah, from this portion. And where that takes you is the next stage, recognizing that no matter where you are, you always have the ability to transform your life for the better. You're never, ever stuck. If you have those two ingredients, you have the mabul. What the flood does, it teaches you not to be complacent, not to give up, but to realize that you always have the power to transform. I think, to me, those are the three most crucial lessons from this week's portion. As I said, there's thousands. But if you could take those 3 points away, I think you will find this portion to be very relevant. And I encourage you to go back and read through the details of the portion. If you have questions on it, you're welcome to send it to me. Okay, so I've been babbling and babbling on for a long time now, without interruption. So I welcome any questions or feedback, and the shir is formally over. Thank you so much.
Shkoyach, beautiful, loved it, fantastic shir. Far from humbling.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Shkoyach. Thank you for joining, Noach. All for you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Shkoyach.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Clive and Shelley. Thank you. Hi, Maria.